The music stopped. Gasps echoed through the wedding hall. As a homeless woman stepped into the billionaire ceremony, mud on her boots, fire in her eyes. No one knew her name, but the groom did. She held a letter and a secret that could destroy everything. The music was soft, elegant, violins floating through the air like silk on water. Dozens of guests turned in admiration as the bride appeared at the top of the aisle, her satin dress glowing under golden afternoon light. Every detail was perfect. Every seat filled with the who's who of the city. Ethan Sterling, tech billionaire and media darling, stood at the altar with a polished smile and a posture trained by years of public life. Then, a rustle, a cough, a voice no one expected to hear. "I need to see Ethan," a woman said, just loud enough to slice through the music. All heads turned. She stood near the back, her clothes layered, oversized, and threadbare. Her gray beanie was frayed at the edges, and her boots, caked with dirt, left faint footprints on the white aisle. For a moment, it was like no one could move. One of the bridesmaids gasped. A guest near the aisle covered their mouth. The wedding planner dropped her headset. "Who is that?" the bride's mother hissed, clinging to her pearl clutch. Security stepped forward. "Ma'am, you can't be here." But Ethan stared. It was like the world around him had been muted. His heart pounded, not from nerves, but from recognition. "Eliza," he whispered, barely audible. The woman took one step closer, her eyes not pleading, but steady. "You remember me," she said, her voice raw but calm. "I know you do." The crowd murmured. Phones were already being raised. Charlotte, the bride, turned toward Ethan, confusion in her eyes. "You know this woman?" she asked under her breath, keeping her smile frozen for the guests. "Is this a prank?" Ethan didn't answer. His hands trembled at his sides. "I just need a moment," Eliza said. "Not to ruin anything. I came to keep a promise." Security waited for a signal, and in that impossible silence, Ethan nodded. "Let her talk," he said, quietly but firm. Everyone stared. The violinist stopped mid-note. Somewhere in the distance, the wind rustled through flower arrangements. Charlotte blinked. "You're serious?" Ethan didn't look at her. His eyes were locked on Eliza, a face from a past he'd buried so deep, it burned just to see it again. And then he stepped off the altar. Ethan stood a few feet from Eliza now, close enough to see how time had traced lines on her face, lines he once thought he'd never see again. The guests behind him fidgeted uncomfortably in their chairs. A few whispered, a few judged, but Ethan's eyes never left hers. "You shouldn't be here," he said softly, not out of anger, out of disbelief. "I know," Eliza replied, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I had to come." Charlotte stepped down from the altar, the hem of her gown brushing over scattered rose petals. She approached cautiously, flashing a tight-lipped smile to maintain appearances. "Ethan," she said, forcing lightness into her voice. "Babe, what's happening? Who is this woman?" Ethan turned to her, swallowing hard. "This is Eliza. She raised me, back when I had nothing." Charlotte's face froze. "Raised you?" Eliza lowered her gaze. "I was a foster caregiver. Took him in when no one else would." The bride's father let out a scoff from the front row. "This is ridiculous. We should be calling the police." "No," Ethan said quickly. "She's telling the truth." He ran a hand through his neatly styled hair, now visibly unraveling. His breath trembled as he spoke. "She was there when I was 12. When they pulled me out of the second home that month. She fed me, taught me how to read a bus schedule, helped me when I had fevers. She was family." Eliza stood silently, arms at her side. There was no triumph in her eyes, just tiredness and a flicker of something fragile. "I thought you were dead," Ethan whispered, a raw crack in his voice. "I almost was," she said, eyes shining. "But not before I found something. Something that belongs to you." Charlotte placed a hand on Ethan's arm, her voice now a sharp whisper. "You can't be serious. This is our wedding. This isn't the time for charity." Ethan slowly pulled his arm away. That touch, so rehearsed, so surface level, suddenly felt cold. He looked back at Eliza, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel like Ethan Sterling the billionaire. He felt like Ethan, the boy who once called her Auntie E. He turned to the wedding coordinator, who was frozen at the side of the altar. "Give us a minute," he said. Eliza blinked fast, clearly overwhelmed by the eyes on her, the judgment, the expensive perfumes clinging to the air. "I didn't come to embarrass you," she whispered. "I came because your mother made me promise I'd give you the letter." Ethan's breath caught in his chest. "My mom." She reached into the inner pocket of her coat, slowly, and pulled out a folded, time-worn envelope. "I kept it safe. All these years, waiting for today." The sound of distant camera shutters clicking filled the silence. Ethan's fingers brushed the letter. He didn't take it, not yet. Instead, he looked at her, really looked. "You look tired." Eliza smiled softly. "So do you." And for a moment, just a brief, fragile beat, the wedding faded. The lights dimmed. The noise hushed. It was just a broken boy and a broken woman, standing face to face, trying to remember what love used to look like. "Please, just go back to your seat," Charlotte urged through gritted teeth, her voice low but sharp. Her eyes never left the envelope, now resting between Ethan's fingers. "This isn't part of our day." Ethan didn't respond. He stared at the letter as if it were radioactive. His hand trembled, and Eliza noticed. "You don't have to read it now," she said, her voice soft. "But you needed to have it. I didn't want to leave this world knowing I broke that promise." Guests whispered louder now. Some pulled out their phones. Others shook their heads. The word homeless slipped through the air like a virus, mocking, judging, dehumanizing. From the front row, the bride's father stood. "This is a disgrace. You let a homeless woman hijack your wedding, Ethan. You're a sterling now, not some street rat." Ethan's shoulders tightened. His jaw clenched. Eliza turned to the older man with surprising calm. "I didn't come here for money, sir. I came because this boy once called me family, and I called him mine." "You don't belong here," Charlotte snapped. "You're not part of this life." Eliza swallowed, then looked around at the sea of faces painted in confusion and judgment. She gently wiped a smudge from her cheek with a wrinkled sleeve and looked back at Ethan. Not with anger, not even hurt, but with quiet dignity. "Maybe not, but I was part of his life when it mattered most." Ethan felt the blood rush to his ears. He looked at Charlotte, her perfect features now twisted in embarrassment. The people surrounding him, investors, influencers, socialites, suddenly looked like strangers wearing masks. "She took me in when nobody else would," he said aloud, voice cracking. "I was 12, angry. I broke her kitchen window the first week. She didn't send me away. She taped it up and told me I had to help wash dishes." A few guests chuckled awkwardly. Eliza smiled faintly. He made a mess of the eggs, scrambled them with the shells still in. Ethan's lips twitched, a ghost of a real smile flickering through. "I never said thank you," he said, looking down. "I just disappeared when the money came. I thought forgetting meant I'd finally made it." Eliza nodded. "I knew that, but I never stopped praying you'd remember." The crowd was hushed now. Charlotte folded her arms. "So what now? You ditch your wedding for some street ghost with a letter and a story." Ethan turned slowly toward her. For the first time all day, he wasn't performing. He wasn't filtering himself for a headline. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but maybe I owe it to her, to myself, to find out." Silence followed. Then, a faint sniffle from somewhere in the second row. One of the guests, a middle-aged woman in a green dress, dabbed her eyes. "I think you're doing the right thing," she whispered. More murmurs. Less judgment now. Less pride. Eliza stood still, quiet in the chaos, not demanding anything, not expecting forgiveness, just being there, present. And Ethan, for the first time in years, he felt like he could breathe. Ethan gripped the letter tightly, as if it might dissolve in his hands. The crisp linen paper was creased, soft at the edges, touched by years of waiting. Behind him, the floral arch loomed, untouched and perfect, a symbol of the life he'd worked so hard to curate. In front of him stood Eliza, uninvited, unpolished, but painfully real. His heart pounded as the weight of shame settled in. "I remember the day I left," he said quietly, voice carrying just enough for nearby guests to hear. "I just won that startup pitch competition. Someone from the board said I needed to clean up my narrative. That investors don't like messy childhoods. So I stopped answering her calls. Changed my number. Buried everything. Eliza didn't flinch. She nodded gently. I figured, she said. Didn't blame you. The world only rewards polish. I knew I wasn't part of that world. Her words stung more than anger ever could. Charlotte scoffed beside him. And what do you want, Eliza? Recognition? Money? A house? Eliza looked up, her gaze steady. No. I want him to know that someone loved him before the world did. The words hit Ethan like a blow. He looked down at the letter again, but his mind was drifting. Flash. A cold winter morning. A space heater humming. Eliza wrapping his hands with wool socks because his gloves had holes. Flash. Birthday candles stuck in a cracked pancake. His name written in ketchup. Flash. The night he cried when no one at school showed up for his science fair. Eliza knelt beside him and whispered, "You're brilliant. One day they'll see it, too." Ethan blinked back tears. He had forgotten it all. Or forced himself to. "I was so ashamed," he whispered. "Not of you. Of me. Of who I used to be. Of what people would think if they knew where I came from." Eliza's lips curled into a sad smile. Funny thing about shame, it always ends up heavier than the truth. He finally looked at her, really looked. Her eyes, worn but kind, held no bitterness. Only exhaustion and something even deeper, forgiveness. From the guests, the mood began to shift. The whispers quieted. Some leaned forward, watching not with judgment, but curiosity, even empathy. And Charlotte, she stood still as stone, arms crossed, veil fluttering in the wind. "This is your moment, Ethan," she said coldly. "Are you going to let her rewrite your story?" Ethan let out a shaky breath. "Maybe the problem is, I've been letting other people write it for too long." He walked over to the altar, not to stand, to sit. He sank onto the steps, letter in hand, eyes closed. The crowd was hushed again, but something had changed. The tension wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about reckoning. A man caught between two lives, the one he built and the one he forgot. And Eliza? She stood where she was, not chasing him, not pushing him, just waiting, because she had already lost everything. And now he had a choice. Charlotte crouched beside Ethan, careful not to wrinkle the layers of her dress. Her voice was low, urgent, almost rehearsed. "Listen to me," she said. "We can fix this. All of it. Just get up, smile, walk back down the aisle, and we'll deal with her later." Ethan didn't move. The letter trembled slightly in his hand. "Charlotte," he whispered, still staring at the paper. "She's the only person who ever showed up when I had nothing. And now you have everything, Ethan." Her voice sharpened, biting at the edges. "Don't throw it away because some ghost from your past showed up with a sob story." The words landed like a slap. Ethan looked up at her. "She's not a ghost. She's why I'm even standing here." Charlotte pulled back. "So that's it? You're going to let her derail the most important day of our lives?" Ethan looked around. The altar, the flowers, the 100 perfect faces staring at him like he was the main character in a fairy tale gone wrong. And there, just a few feet away, Eliza turned to leave. She adjusted her coat, not angrily, but slowly, almost like she was used to walking away unnoticed. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "I shouldn't have come. I thought maybe you'd want to know. But I was wrong." Ethan stood. Not fast, he hesitated. The kind of hesitation that comes from being pulled in two directions, loyalty and legacy. "Eliza, wait," he said. But she didn't stop. Charlotte stepped between them. "Don't you dare make a scene. If you go after her now, you'll ruin everything." He looked at her. "Everything." She blinked. "Yes." He took a breath, looked past her toward the exit Eliza was nearing. Her steps were slow, as if she wasn't sure where she'd sleep that night. Ethan turned to the crowd. Some were filming. Others were visibly uncomfortable. But a few were watching with tears in their eyes. One man whispered to his wife, "That's the kind of love you don't get twice in a lifetime." Ethan's throat tightened. His feet stayed glued for just one more second, caught in the gravity of a life built on curated perfection. And then, he moved, past Charlotte, past the altar, past the shocked stares, toward Eliza. "Eliza," he called again, louder this time. "Please, don't go." She stopped, turned, her face tired and lined, but unmistakably hopeful, looked up at him as if seeing the boy he once was. "I was so proud of you," she said. "Even when you forgot me." Ethan stepped closer. "I didn't forget you. I buried you. Because I was scared of who I was back then." Eliza nodded gently. "And now?" He exhaled. "Now, I want to remember." The letter, still unopened, crinkled in his hand. Charlotte watched from the altar, her jaw set in disbelief. And somewhere in the back row, someone began to clap. Ethan stood there for a moment, breath heavy, hands still clutched around the worn envelope. The world around him had gone quiet again. Not silent, but holding its breath. Eliza waited just a few steps away. Her eyes, wet but calm, were locked on his. "I'm scared," Ethan admitted, voice low, "to open this, to know what she wrote." Eliza smiled gently. "That's why she asked me to be the one to bring it to you. She knew it would take more than paper to make you stop and listen." His fingers slipped under the seal. The glue crackled. The paper was soft from years of wear. He unfolded it carefully, as if it might tear apart just from being seen. And then he read, "My dearest Ethan, if you're reading this, it means Eliza found you. And you've made it, further than I ever did, further than I ever could. I'm proud of you, but not for the money, not for the company, for surviving, for growing, for still having a heart. Eliza was more than a sister to me. She was your second mother. When I was dying, she promised to keep you safe. And she did. When I left, I knew you'd have someone who loved you, even when the world forgot. Don't turn away from her, Ethan. Not now. Because the world will always love your story, but she's the one who loved you when it wasn't a story worth telling." By the end, Ethan's voice cracked. He folded the letter slowly and held it against his chest. The guests were silent. Some cried. Others just stared, unsure how to process what they were witnessing. Charlotte remained frozen in place, her expression unreadable. Ethan turned to Eliza. His eyes were red, but open, like a dam had broken after years of pretending it wasn't full. "You carried this all these years?" Eliza nodded, her voice barely audible. "I didn't know when or if I'd ever see you again, but I knew I had to try." He looked at her, truly looked. And then, for the first time in years, Ethan reached out and wrapped his arms around her. She tensed at first, surprised. Then she melted into it, pressing her forehead against his shoulder. The hug wasn't dramatic. It was quiet, raw, long overdue. The crowd watched, not as spectators anymore, but as witnesses to something real. And in the middle of a billionaire's wedding, surrounded by gold leaf cakes and designer gowns and elite egos, love came back to life. When Ethan stepped back from Eliza, everything felt still, quiet in the way the world gets after something sacred has happened. The altar behind him, once a symbol of everything he thought he wanted, now looked strangely hollow. The grand floral arch, the champagne flutes, the monogrammed wedding favors, all flawless, all empty. He turned slowly and faced the crowd. "I know this isn't what anyone expected," he said, voice steady, echoing across the garden. "And I know some of you think this ruined the day, but maybe it saved it." Charlotte stood in front of the arch, veil trembling slightly in the breeze. Her eyes met his, and for a moment, the future they had imagined flickered between them, shiny, curated, convenient. "I can't do this," Ethan said, gently but clearly. "Not like this. Not while I'm pretending I'm someone I'm not." The silence was thunderous. Charlotte's face stayed composed, but her arms crossed, her voice sharp. "So what, Ethan? You're choosing her over us?" Ethan took a slow breath. "I'm choosing the truth. For once." She didn't cry. She didn't argue. She simply nodded, a quiet, bitter kind of nod. "I hope you enjoy your story," she said, and walked off the aisle, disappearing between rows of silent guests. Ethan stood still for a long moment. No applause, no music, just wind and whispers. Then, Eliza stepped beside him. She didn't speak. She just reached for his hand, and he took it. Later that evening, the crowd had long gone. The garden was empty, flower petals scattered like memories across the grass. Ethan and Eliza sat on a park bench just beyond the estate, overlooking the water. The tuxedo was wrinkled, Her coat still hung from her shoulders. A silence lingered between them, not uncomfortable, just full. "I miss this," Ethan said softly. "Me too," she replied, smiling. He handed her the letter again. "Want to keep it?" Eliza shook her head. "No, it's yours. You earned it." The sun dipped below the horizon. The air cooled. They didn't talk about what came next. Not the press, not the fallout, not the loss. Because in that moment, they weren't homeless or wealthy, forgotten or famous. They were just family, reunited not by chance, but by a promise kept. And for the first time in years, Ethan Sterling didn't feel like he had anything to prove. He just felt home.